You really think you can just walk through here unnoticed? Jada Thompson's voice barely rose above the hum of the airport security scanners, yet it cut through the tense air like a spark in dry grass. She paused at the edge of the checkpoint, her hands lightly resting on the straps of her black backpack, the sunlight catching the sleek zippers, glinting like tiny signals. The ICE agents ahead, Agent Carter and Agent Reynolds, exchanged a brief glance, their jaws tight, shoulders squared as though they were ready to assert control, their polished badges reflecting the harsh fluorescent light above. A long line of travelers behind her shifted uncomfortably, the low murmur of conversations fading as the agent's gazes fixed on her, scanning every movement, every breath. Jada's dark eyes swept the room quickly, noting the placement of the cameras, the positions of the metal detectors, the subtle shift of the agent's stance, their fingers brushing near their holsters, not in menace, but in the habit of authority. Her sneakers squeaked softly against the tile floor, a rhythmic punctuation in the heavy, silent tension that had settled over the checkpoint. Around them, the hum of the ventilation and the occasional beep of a scanner seemed louder, almost deafening, emphasizing the stillness that had fallen over the agents as they watched her approach. Jada's posture was calm, shoulders back, head held high, but inside, a familiar adrenaline coursed through her veins, the kind that sharpened perception and reflexes. Every subtle detail mattered, the slight flicker of a screen, the way the light bounced off a polished surface, the echo of a rolling suitcase in the hallway. As she placed her backpack on the conveyor, the metallic click of her belongings joining the X-ray machine punctuated the tension. Agent Carter stepped closer, his polished shoes tapping the tile in a slow, measured rhythm. "Step aside," he said, voice even but carrying the weight of unquestioned authority. Jada didn't flinch. Instead, her gaze met his directly, steady and unwavering. Around them, travelers glanced over their shoulders, sensing the unspoken challenge in the air. She exhaled slowly, feeling the subtle rise and fall of her chest, the rhythm of her heartbeat aligning with the echo of footsteps and beeping scanners. It was a test of patience as much as it was of observation. The light above reflected off the metal surfaces, throwing sharp, angular shadows that danced along the walls and floor, framing her in a way that seemed to amplify her presence rather than diminish it. A soft breeze from the air vents brushed her hair back from her face, and she caught the faint scent of coffee from the nearby cafe, mingling with the sterile smell of sanitizer. Every detail anchored her focus, every sensation heightening her awareness. Agent Reynolds leaned slightly forward, tilting his head, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth, underestimating her by the faintest measure. "Don't think we haven't seen you," he murmured, a warning wrapped in casual arrogance. Jada tilted her head, lips barely parting as if she were considering the words, but she said nothing, letting the silence hang like a taut wire ready to snap. Around them, the line of passengers grew restless, shuffling feet and whispered apologies forming a soft backdrop to the high tension. And in that suspended moment, the ordinary airport transformed into a stage, every gleam of light, every shifting shadow, every heartbeat magnified, capturing a still frame before the storm of action would inevitably unfold. The fluorescent lights above hummed softly, casting a sterile glow across the metal surfaces of the checkpoint. Jada Thompson's eyes flicked briefly to the ceiling, noting the slight flicker from a faulty bulb, and then returned to the agents, her expression unreadable yet calculated, a quiet calm masking the readiness that thrummed beneath her skin. Each step she took was deliberate, heels barely audible against the polished tile, yet the sound echoed faintly, drawing the attention of bystanders who instinctively recoiled from the intensity radiating from her presence. Agent Carter adjusted his tie, the fabric crisp and stiff, a symbol of the control he believed he wielded over the space and everyone in it. His shadow stretched along the floor, meeting the harsh edge of the light that fell across Jada's face, highlighting the fine line of determination in her jaw. Agent Reynolds shifted slightly, the soles of his shoes scuffing in tiny arcs, a subtle nervous rhythm betraying the confidence he tried to project, his gaze lingering on the subtle micro-expressions of Jada's face, searching for weakness that did not exist. The line of passengers behind them seemed to dissolve into an ambient blur, their conversations dwindling into whispers, their movements subdued, as if the entire airport had collectively inhaled, waiting for the tension to resolve itself. Jada's hands rested gently at her sides, fingers brushing the smooth fabric of her coat, feeling the texture, the slight give of the stitching beneath her touch, grounding her in the moment while her mind scanned the room, noting every camera, every angle of the metal detectors, the reflection of lights on the stainless steel counters, the faint gleam on the edge of a boarding pass held loosely in a traveler's hand. She breathed evenly, each inhalation measured, feeling the subtle rise of her chest as she centered herself in the midst of the scrutiny, the hum of the air conditioning a steady undertone that matched the rhythm of her own heart. Agent Carter's voice broke the silence, calm yet edged with authority. "Place your bag here." And he gestured toward the conveyor with a motion that was practiced, precise, meant to command compliance without overt confrontation. Jada obeyed, sliding her backpack forward, the metallic zipper catching the light briefly, a small signal in the muted atmosphere, the soft clatter of her belongings moving along the belt punctuating the tension like the first note of a measured chord. Agent Reynolds leaned slightly, eyes narrowing in calculated assessment, the corners of his mouth twitching in a faint smirk, the way one might tilt a chess piece, anticipating a move that was not coming, misjudging the presence before him. The stillness around them intensified. The distant announcement of a flight number seemed to stretch into eternity, each word echoing faintly in the high-ceilinged hall, a soft counterpoint to the silent standoff that had crystallized in the narrow corridor. Jada's gaze swept briefly across the checkpoint, noting the precise alignment of the scanning machines, the subtle shift of shadows, the slight unevenness in the tiles beneath her feet, each detail recorded with the precision of trained observation. She exhaled subtly, her breath even and controlled, a rhythm that contrasted with the unsteady pulse she imagined in the agents as they measured her, testing boundaries she did not intend to yield. The fluorescent lights flickered again, a microsecond of darkness that made the polished surfaces shimmer differently, the slight change catching the edge of Agent Carter's eye, a momentary distraction in the frozen tableau. Jada's posture remained unwavering, shoulders back, head high, the faint tilt of her chin signaling confidence and composure, an invisible declaration of presence and awareness. In a space dominated by authority, the subtle weight of anticipation settling into the room like dust that refuses to settle completely. Every micro-movement of the agents, every twitch of their hands, the subtle shift in their stance, was catalogued, weighed, and assessed by her, the tension rising imperceptibly as seconds stretched into what felt like minutes, the hum of life around them continuing, yet feeling impossibly distant. The metallic beeping of the scanner echoed again, a staccato punctuation, and Jada's eyes followed the slow movement of her bag along the conveyor, noting the gentle vibration of the rollers, the smooth glint of the metal beneath, the slight sway as it approached the X-ray chamber. Agent Reynolds inhaled slowly, shoulders tightening imperceptibly, sensing the subtle defiance that radiated without a word, and Agent Carter's eyes narrowed slightly, the practiced mask of authority faltering ever so briefly, a shadow of doubt crossing the polished veneer as the silent intensity of Jada Thompson anchored the space, commanding observation without a single gesture of confrontation. And in that suspended moment, the air itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting, watching, suspended at the edge of action yet to come. Jada Thompson's eyes shifted slightly, just enough to catch the edge of a reflection in the polished glass wall, a fleeting shimmer that mirrored her composed expression, the way the light bent across her cheekbones highlighting the subtle tension held in her posture. She adjusted the strap of her backpack with a gentle movement, almost imperceptible, yet precise, her fingers brushing the smooth fabric, feeling the subtle texture that anchored her in the midst of observation. Agent Carter stepped forward, the heel of his polished shoe tapping the floor in a controlled rhythm, a metronome of authority that seemed designed to fill the silence with an unspoken command. Jada did not flinch. Instead, she inhaled slowly, drawing in the recycled air of the airport concourse, the faint scent of sanitizer mixing with the distant aroma of coffee and pastries from a nearby cafe, grounding her awareness in the physical reality of the moment. The X-ray machine hummed a low, continuous note as her bag passed through, the metallic items within clinking softly, a subtle percussion that seemed to punctuate the stilled tension in the space. Agent Reynolds shifted his weight from one foot to the other, the subtle creak of his shoes against the floor barely audible over the soft hum of the ventilation, his eyes flicking toward the monitor, scanning for anomalies, for any trace of concealment that might justify his sense of control. Behind them, the line of travelers waited, a muted audience, their whispers and rustling feet blending into an almost imperceptible background chorus, each person holding their breath without realizing it, caught in the gravitational pull of the unspoken standoff. Jada's gaze traveled in a slow arc across the checkpoint, noting every detail. The slight unevenness of the floor tiles, the polished edges of the stainless steel counters, the faint reflection of her face in the glass doors to the waiting area, the way the fluorescent light cast subtle angular shadows across the surface of the conveyor belt. Her fingers brushed the edge of her jacket, feeling the warmth of the fabric, the stitching smooth under her touch, each detail a sensory anchor that allowed her mind to remain clear and focused. Agent Carter leaned slightly forward, his face composed yet rigid, the careful angle of his shoulders and the tight line of his jaw signaling the readiness of someone accustomed to exerting influence, yet betraying the tiniest hint of anticipation that something in the stillness was not as he expected. The soft echo of a rolling suitcase in the distance punctuated the stillness, each wheel click a counterpoint to the heartbeat that thrummed subtly beneath Jada's calm exterior. She exhaled, slow and deliberate, sensing the shift in energy as the agent's eyes lingered on her, the micro-expressions of curiosity and subtle uncertainty passing between them almost imperceptibly, a brief flicker of acknowledgement that the presence before them was not ordinary. The bright tiles beneath her feet reflected the soft glow of the overhead lighting, creating a faint halo around her shadow, grounding her stance as she remained poised, a calm eye in the quiet storm of authority and scrutiny that surrounded her. Every slight motion, every soft sound, every detail in the room was cataloged by her mind, processed and stored, the rhythm of the environment mapping itself into the pattern of awareness that guided her stance and subtle movements. The conveyor belt shifted her belongings slowly forward, the metallic clink of a keychain and the gentle clatter of a water bottle punctuating the space with soft, rhythmic sounds, each echo emphasizing the focused quiet that had settled around. The checkpoint. Agent Reynolds shifted again, leaning closer to the monitor, his expression tightening slightly, a fleeting sign of anticipation that perhaps the situation was not as straightforward as it appeared. Jada's eyes caught the subtle flicker of a monitor in the periphery, noting the angle and the faint reflection of light that glimmered across the screen, grounding her in the precision of observation that had become second nature, a practiced awareness that allowed her to navigate the charged environment with effortless composure. The hum of the X-ray machine continued, a low constant that resonated faintly through the soles of her shoes, a rhythmic undercurrent to the tense tableau, while the agents adjusted their stances minutely, reacting to the unspoken, the presence that held attention without movement, the stillness that carried its own force. Every glance, every slight twitch of muscle in the agent's shoulders, every soft footfall of passing travelers was absorbed, processed, and accounted for in Jada's subtle assessment, her posture unwavering, her breathing even, a quiet equilibrium holding steady against the pressure and the scrutiny, anchoring her in the suspended tension of the checkpoint environment. Jada Thompson's gaze shifted slightly to the conveyor belt as her bag disappeared into the X-ray chamber, the soft hum of the machine mingling with the low murmur of distant announcements echoing through the high-ceiling terminal. She felt the faint vibration of the rollers beneath her hands, the subtle metallic resonance grounding her focus as she observed the precise movements of Agent Carter, his posture stiff yet controlled, eyes narrowing in deliberate evaluation. The fluorescent lights flickered gently overhead, casting elongated shadows across the polished tile floor, highlighting the meticulous alignment of the checkpoint equipment and the exact spacing of travelers in line. Agent Reynolds leaned forward subtly, his fingers brushing the edge of the counter as he studied her face for any hint of uncertainty, any micro-expression that might betray hesitation. Jada's breathing remained measured, a steady rhythm that anchored her in the moment, while her eyes flicked briefly to the reflective surface of a nearby panel, noting the agent's mirrored movements, the subtle shift of weight from one foot to another, the faint twitch of a jaw that suggested suppressed tension. The line of passengers behind them had grown slightly restless, the shuffle of feet and quiet coughs forming a muted background symphony to the silent standoff. Yet Jada remained. An island of calm, every detail registered and processed with careful precision. Her fingers lightly brushed the smooth fabric of her jacket, feeling the fine weave, the slight warmth where her hand rested, a tactile reminder of presence and control in the midst of scrutiny. Agent Carter adjusted the lapel of his jacket, the crisp fabric shifting just enough to catch the light, and then gestured subtly toward a small monitor displaying the X-ray images, his eyes flicking to the screen with the practiced intensity of someone accustomed to authority. Jada's eyes followed his glance momentarily, noting the positioning of each object within her bag, the way the light refracted off the metallic surfaces, and the subtle way shadows bent across the contours of the conveyor belt. The soft hum of the ventilation system above created a low, continuous backdrop, mixing with the occasional beep from a scanner, each sound amplifying the suspended tension that wrapped around the checkpoint like a physical presence. She exhaled softly, allowing her shoulders to relax fractionally while keeping her core posture alert, every micro-adjustment conscious and deliberate, a silent statement of composure and awareness. Agent Reynolds tilted his head slightly, a fleeting flicker of curiosity crossing his face as he observed her, noting the absence of nervous tics or fidgeting, the calm assurance that radiated quietly from her stance. Jada's gaze swept the room slowly, methodically, taking in the polished edges of the counters, the reflection of the tiled floor beneath, the way light shifted across the ceiling panels, and the subtle variations in the shadows that the terminal's architecture cast. Each detail added to the rich tapestry of observation she maintained, building a mental map that allowed her to navigate the tense environment effortlessly. The soft clicking of a distant suitcase wheel punctuated the silence, drawing her attention to the periphery as she continued her quiet assessment, noting how each traveler moved, the tiny cues in posture and expression that could betray impatience or unease. Agent Carter's eyes lingered on her for a moment longer, scanning for reaction, and in that pause, the faintest shift occurred in the room. The collective awareness of an unspoken challenge, the quiet tension that hinted at a presence beyond ordinary expectation. Jada adjusted her stance slightly, the subtle movement precise, deliberate, and fluid, an unspoken signal that she was fully present and aware, absorbing every sensory input, every flicker of light, every faint sound, translating them into a map of awareness that kept her in control of the suspended moment. The conveyor belt continued its motion, the soft metallic clatter of her items moving forward merging with the rhythmic hum of the terminal, creating a cadence that underscored the stillness of the standoff, while the agent's measured breathing and shifting weight reflected their engagement in the silent assessment. Every glance, every minuscule gesture, every shift of light and shadow was registered, cataloged, and internalized by Jada, her posture unyielding, her composure absolute, a calm center in the quietly charged environment, ready to respond with precision to the moment that was yet to come. Jada Thompson paused for a fraction of a second as the X-ray machine completed its cycle, the subtle hum of the belt ending with a soft click that resonated through the checkpoint like the closing note of a measured chord. She allowed her eyes to drift momentarily toward the small monitor, noting the outline of each item in her bag, the way the light refracted and created faint shadows along the edges, a silent geometry that spoke to her trained observation. Agent Carter straightened slightly, adjusting the cuff of his shirt, the precise movement reflecting years of habit, a micro-gesture of control that contrasted sharply with the quiet poise she maintained. Agent Reynolds leaned forward again, fingertips brushing the edge of the counter, the subtle shift of weight in his stance betraying the faintest tension, a rhythm in opposition to Jada's calm. Around them, the terminal seemed to compress, the ambient sounds of distant announcements, rolling suitcases, and soft footsteps fading into a muted background, as if the space itself were holding its breath, attuned to the suspended energy between the figures. Jada's shoulders remained steady, her back straight, the gentle tilt of her chin casting a faint shadow that accentuated the sharp clarity in her eyes that scanned every detail without overt movement, absorbing reflections from the polished counters, glimmers of light from the stainless steel edges, and the subtle change in the agent's posture. She shifted her weight slightly, just enough to maintain balance and readiness, the soft scrape of her shoes against the tile almost imperceptible, yet grounding her in the physical space. Agent Carter's gaze flicked to her hands resting lightly at her sides, noting the relaxed positioning, and, for a moment, he sensed a discrepancy between appearance and capability, a silent acknowledgement that her calmness was not uncertainty but controlled awareness. The line of passengers behind them moved with quiet hesitation, the faint shuffle of feet and low murmurs fading as the agent's focus remained locked, yet the subtle tension radiating from Jada seemed to ripple outward, an invisible field of composed energy. The fluorescent lights overhead shifted slightly, a flicker that danced across the polished floor and counters, creating soft patterns of shadow that moved in tandem with the angles of the architecture. Jada's eyes caught each nuance, the subtle way the light bent across reflective surfaces, noting the micro-reflections that could reveal the slightest movement in the agent's hands or posture. She exhaled slowly, the soft sound barely audible, and allowed her gaze to sweep once more across the environment, integrating every small detail into a precise awareness that grounded her in the moment. Agent Reynolds shifted, tilting his head slightly, lips pressing together in a thin line as he registered the unyielding steadiness of her presence, the quiet assurance that radiated without a single word or gesture of confrontation. The hum of the ventilation system, the soft click of distant wheels, and the faint rustle of passengers' belongings formed a subtle cadence that Jada matched internally, a steady rhythm that kept her awareness sharp and poised. Every small movement of the agents, every subtle shift of light, and every faint sound in the terminal was processed, cataloged, and integrated into her perception, a continuous map of observation and readiness. She adjusted the strap of her bag again, the fabric smooth under her fingers, an anchor that tied her presence to the physical world as her mind continued its silent assessment of angles, distances, and reflective surfaces, preparing for the moment that would inevitably require a precise and deliberate response. The soft echo of footsteps in the distance punctuated the suspended atmosphere, while Jada maintained an unwavering posture, shoulders aligned, gaze focused, fully aware of the space, the light, and the agent's every measured microgesture, ready to navigate the tense environment with controlled composure and silent precision. Jada Thompson took a deliberate step forward, the soft thud of her sneaker against the polished tile carrying through the terminal as if marking the beginning of a silent assertion. Her fingers lightly brushed the strap of her backpack, adjusting it with a practiced precision, the movement subtle yet purposeful, an unspoken signal of readiness that Agent Carter and Agent Reynolds registered almost immediately. The fluorescent lighting above created a faint gleam along the edges of the conveyor and the surrounding counters, casting long, angular shadows that stretched toward the agents, accentuating the space between their expectation of compliance and the quiet determination in her stance. Jada's eyes scanned the terminal with calm intensity, observing the placement of cameras, the flow of passengers, and the subtle shifts in the agent's posture, each microgesture cataloged and integrated into her awareness. She inhaled slowly, chest rising with controlled rhythm, the sound barely audible over the low hum of the X-ray machine and the muted chatter in the background, a stark contrast to the pulse of attention she felt radiating from the agents. Agent Reynolds straightened slightly, his hands brushing the counter with a subtle, measured movement, and for a brief moment his eyes reflected a flicker of uncertainty as he perceived the composure and focus in her gaze. Jada's shoulders remained steady, back aligned, her stance grounded and fluid, ready to respond to any shift in the environment while projecting an aura of quiet authority. The soft metallic click of the conveyor continued, each object sliding smoothly into the scanner, the gentle echoes emphasizing the stillness and suspended anticipation in the room. Passengers shifted their weight and whispered among themselves, the soft rhythm of their movement a muted accompaniment to the heightened focus that centered on Jada, her presence commanding observation without overt confrontation. She allowed her eyes to sweep briefly across the reflective surfaces of the terminal, noting the slight distortions and glimmers as light met glass and metal, integrating each visual cue into her mental map of spatial awareness. The faint hum of the ventilation system provided a steady undertone, mingling with the occasional mechanical sound of rolling luggage and distant announcements, each detail reinforcing her perception of the surrounding environment and the positions of the agents relative to her. Agent Carter adjusted the sleeve of his jacket, the fabric shifting slightly, and leaned forward in a subtle, calculated gesture, a display of procedural authority that contrasted with the still, measured confidence radiating from Jada. Her head remained poised, chin slightly elevated, eyes steady, observing without haste, absorbing each reflection, each sound, each movement, allowing the atmosphere itself to guide her silent assessment of readiness. The overhead lights flickered faintly, creating ephemeral shadows that danced along the contours of the counters and the floor, highlighting the interplay between light and presence, emphasizing the quiet tension that had settled over the checkpoint. Jada's fingers brushed lightly against the strap of her bag again, the subtle texture and warmth providing a tactile anchor as her mind processed the environment, integrating microexpressions, posture shifts, and subtle auditory cues into a cohesive understanding of the unfolding moment. Each breath, each blink, each minuscule movement of the agents was cataloged, measured, and anticipated, and the soft rhythm of her own internal pulse harmonized with the ambient sounds of the terminal, a quiet cadence that underscored the deliberate, silent preparation for the moment she had decided to act with precision, confidence, and awareness in the controlled space around her. Jada Thompson shifted her weight subtly, the polished floor beneath her reflecting a faint shimmer from the overhead fluorescent lights as she took a measured step closer to the conveyor belt, her eyes scanning every reflection, every glint of metal in the X-ray chamber, absorbing the quiet tension that had gathered in the space. Agent Carter's brow furrowed slightly, a micro-expression barely perceptible, as he noted her calm, deliberate movements, the way she aligned her posture with the angles of light and shadow, projecting a presence that was both composed and commanding without a single word. Agent Reynolds leaned marginally forward, fingertips resting lightly on the counter, the subtle tightening of his jawline betraying an unexpected awareness that the woman before them was not ordinary, that the equilibrium he assumed he maintained was quietly challenged by the precision and poise radiating from her stance. Jada's gaze drifted across the terminal, catching the movement of travelers in the background, the gentle sway of carry-on bags on rolling wheels, the soft rustle of jackets. Yet her attention remained anchored, fully present, noting the exact position of each agent, the slight tension in their shoulders, the way light bounced off their polished shoes, each detail informing her mental map of the environment. The hum of the ventilation system above blended with the faint beeping of nearby scanners and the soft murmur of distant conversations, a subtle auditory canvas that contrasted with the focused silence surrounding the checkpoint. She exhaled gently, a slow, even breath that reinforced the controlled cadence of her stance, the micro-adjustments of her balance imperceptible yet precise, every movement contributing to a silent projection of confidence and readiness. The reflective surfaces of the counters and glass panels captured fragments of light, creating a pattern of subtle highlights and shadows that accentuated the deliberate geometry of the space, and Jada's eyes registered each nuance, the brief glimmer of movement in the agent's peripherals noted and cataloged in her awareness. A distant announcement echoed faintly through the terminal, the words stretched thin across the polished expanse, yet the intensity of the immediate space seemed to absorb it, allowing the charged quiet to dominate the perception of all present. Jada's fingers brushed the strap of her bag once more, a tactile anchor, grounding her in the physicality of the moment even as her mind cataloged the interplay of light, shadow, and human presence with methodical precision. Agent Carter shifted slightly, the polished heel of his shoe making a soft scrape against the floor, a gesture that spoke to controlled authority, Yet the subtle hesitation in his posture suggested a quiet recalibration in the face of Jada's unwavering composure. She remained poised, shoulders aligned, chin slightly lifted, eyes steady and absorbing, integrating the nuances of microexpressions, posture shifts, and environmental cues into a cohesive understanding that held her ready to respond, to assert, and to navigate the charged space with silent control. The soft metallic clicks from the conveyor echoed again, punctuating the suspended atmosphere, each sound marking the passage of measured time in the high-ceiling terminal. Travelers behind them shifted slightly, the quiet rhythm of movement accentuating the focused stillness between Jada and the agents, a subtle interplay of awareness and anticipation. Every microgesture of the agents, every shift in light or sound, was absorbed and processed by Jada, her posture unyielding, her presence commanding observation and respect, a calm center in the quietly charged environment, radiating readiness and controlled precision that filled the checkpoint with a palpable, silent authority. Jada Thompson stood still for a moment, her gaze sweeping the checkpoint with deliberate focus, absorbing the subtle shifts in light as the fluorescent panels above flickered softly, casting elongated, geometric shadows across the polished tile. The soft hum of the ventilation mixed with the faint beeping of distant scanners, creating a rhythmic undercurrent that matched the steady cadence of her own controlled breathing, each exhalation deliberate and even. Agent Carter's posture shifted slightly, a microgesture of tension evident in the tilt of his shoulders, the slight tightening of his jaw betraying an awareness that the woman before him was not only composed, but fully in command of her presence. Agent Reynolds adjusted his stance, the polished heel of his shoe scraping the floor lightly, a faint rhythm underscoring the quiet intensity of the space, as his eyes tracked Jada's every microexpression, searching for signs of hesitation or uncertainty that did not exist. Jada's fingers rested lightly on the strap of her backpack, feeling the smooth fabric beneath her touch, a subtle tactile anchor that reinforced her awareness of the environment while her mind cataloged the positions of agents, passengers, and reflective surfaces across the terminal. The conveyor belt emitted a soft metallic click as each object passed through the scanner, punctuating the suspended tension with measured, predictable rhythm. Around them, travelers shifted imperceptibly, the gentle scrape of shoes against tile and whispered exchanges forming a muted backdrop to the quiet standoff. Yet Jada's presence dominated the space with a calm intensity that drew the attention of even those at a distance. Her eyes caught the glint of polished metal on the counters, the faint reflection of light on the glass panels, and the subtle angles formed by shadows across the floor, each detail reinforcing her mental map of the environment and the precise awareness she maintained. Agent Carter's eyes flickered momentarily to her hands and posture, noting the poised control in every microgesture, a silent acknowledgement of her awareness and readiness that contrasted with his expectation of dominance. Jada adjusted her stance slightly, weight distributed evenly, shoulders relaxed yet aligned, head held high, projecting calm authority while remaining acutely aware of every micro-shift in the agent's balance, every flicker of attention, and every subtle environmental cue. The hum of the X-ray machine continued steadily, each faint vibration transmitted through the conveyor beneath her bag, registering with her subconscious, a constant rhythm grounding her awareness. The terminal lights shifted briefly, reflecting off the polished surfaces in a transient play of light and shadow, accentuating the precision with which she observed her surroundings. Each subtle movement, each micro-expression of the agents, and each faint sound from the passengers or equipment was absorbed and integrated into her assessment of the space, creating a detailed mental map of readiness and anticipation. Jada's exhalation was controlled, deliberate, and slow, reinforcing the calm energy that radiated from her stance, while her eyes moved methodically across the checkpoint, absorbing the interplay of light, shadow, and motion, anchoring her presence firmly in the moment. Agent Reynolds leaned slightly forward again, a subtle furrow crossing his brow, as if sensing the quiet command of the woman before him, while Agent Carter's posture reflected the smallest trace of uncertainty, the careful tension in his shoulders betraying the realization that Jada Thompson was neither ordinary nor easily underestimated. Every element of the environment, from the flicker of lights to the distant footsteps and rolling luggage, was processed and cataloged by her mind, the awareness of space and presence held in a delicate, yet fully controlled balance. Jada's fingers brushed the strap of her bag once more, a minor adjustment that anchored her physically while maintaining the flow of mental calculation and perceptive assessment, her stance unwavering, eyes steady, radiating silent authority and measured readiness, a quiet assertion of composure that filled the terminal with palpable focus and anticipation. Jada Thompson exhaled slowly, letting the measured breath anchor her in the quiet tension of the terminal as her gaze swept across the polished counters and reflective surfaces, noting every glint of light and the subtle shifts of shadow that moved across the floor. Agent Carter's eyes flicked to her posture, the precise alignment of her shoulders and head, recognizing the quiet assertion of authority that radiated from her without a single word. Agent Reynolds shifted slightly, the soft scrape of his polished shoes on the tile marking the tension that ran beneath the veneer of procedure, a rhythm in contrast with the calm assurance emanating from Jada. The conveyor belt emitted a faint metallic click as her bag passed fully into the scanner, the sound punctuating the suspended moment with deliberate cadence, while passengers in line held subtle movements, shifting weight and adjusting luggage with cautious restraint, as if sensing the focused intensity in the checkpoint. Jada's fingers lightly brushed the strap of her backpack once more, a subtle tactile grounding as her eyes caught the reflection of fluorescent lights on the stainless steel, integrating each shimmer into her mental map of the environment. The hum of the ventilation system and distant announcements blended into a soft, constant undertone, allowing the fine nuances of microexpressions and posture shifts in the agents to register with heightened clarity. Her back remained straight, shoulders aligned, head slightly elevated, eyes sweeping deliberately across the space, taking in the angles of counters, the positioning of passengers, and the reflective surfaces that created multiple perspectives, each detail reinforcing her situational awareness. Agent Carter adjusted the cuff of his sleeve, the motion precise and controlled, his gaze lingering briefly on her eyes, registering the unyielding composure and the quiet calculation in every subtle gesture. Agent Reynolds leaned forward imperceptibly, the faint tightening of his jaw a signal of the recognition that the presence before them was not ordinary, that the equilibrium he expected to maintain was quietly challenged by her poised and deliberate stance. Jada's breathing remained slow and steady, each inhalation and exhalation deliberate, aligning with the soft cadence of ambient sound in the terminal, the distant shuffle of travelers, and the hum of electronic devices integrating into her perception of rhythm and space. The overhead lights flickered briefly, a subtle dance of shadows that accentuated the angles of the counters and floor, enhancing the silent geometry that she observed and incorporated into her awareness. Every movement of the agents, every minute shift of their weight, every microexpression was noted and cataloged, creating a layered understanding of readiness and anticipation that radiated from her posture. The reflective surfaces and polished tiles captured fleeting highlights, allowing her eyes to track changes imperceptible to the casual observer, each glimmer adding to her perception of control over the space. Her fingers adjusted the strap of her bag with careful precision, anchoring her physical presence while her mind continued a methodical assessment of angles, distances, and potential movement, ensuring that every detail was accounted for and understood. The low metallic resonance from the moving conveyor, the subtle rustle of a distant suitcase, and the muted footfalls of passengers behind them punctuated the stilled environment, each sound integrated into her awareness, reinforcing the poised readiness that defined her presence. Agent Carter's posture remained firm, yet his eyes reflected a trace of uncertainty, an acknowledgement that the woman before him was not to be underestimated. While Agent Reynolds mirrored the subtle tension, their careful attention registering the controlled authority that Jada projected silently, commanding the space without overt action, holding the terminal in a quiet, tense equilibrium as the moment stretched, charged with anticipation and precision. Experience the intensity of Black Stories. as a determined black woman faces a high-stakes checkpoint, navigating the airport terminal with poised awareness and measured composure, while ICE agents struggle to assert authority. The seasoned agent observes every microgesture and subtle shift in posture, reflecting on the quiet power of the black woman, a central figure in these black stories, whose calculated movements, steady breathing, and keen perception command respect and silently challenge the expectations of control. Witness the terminal environment transform into a dynamic stage of observation, tension, and strategic awareness as the black woman integrates light, shadow, and sound into her situational assessment, creating a controlled, compelling narrative that embodies the essence of black stories, highlighting skillful presence and silent authority. The agent's recognition of her unyielding composure underscores the thematic power reversal that defines black stories, and the continuous interplay between her deliberate actions and the environment heightens the cinematic suspense, making this a captivating exploration of tension and perceptive mastery. This narrative immerses you in black stories through the interplay of authority and quiet strength, emphasizing the strategic awareness, composure, and subtle influence of the black woman and the attentive ICE agent, crafting an unforgettable, high-stakes scenario that exemplifies the finest qualities of black stories. Create a realistic portrait of a young adult black woman, around 25 years old, wearing a casual yet professional outfit, standing in a modern airport terminal, looking straight at the camera with calm confidence. Frontal view. No cartoon, no CGI, no illustration, natural lighting, detailed textures, realistic facial expression. Create a realistic portrait of a middle-aged white male ICE agent, around 35 years old, wearing a professional uniform with badges, standing in an airport checkpoint, looking straight at the camera with focused authority. Frontal view. No cartoon, no CGI, no illustration, natural lighting, detailed textures, serious facial expression. 1. A high-stakes airport terminal scene. The black woman and white ICE agent stand back-to-back in the center of the bustling hall, alert and poised, shadows stretching across the polished tile, fluorescent lights reflecting off their tense expressions, scanning for unseen threats. Their body language a perfect mix of readiness and anticipation. The distant blur of passengers and luggage emphasizing the cinematic intensity of their synchronized vigilance. 2. The black woman in her daily life. Walking through a sunlit urban street, earbuds in, casual professional attire slightly tousled by a gentle breeze, eyes focused yet thoughtful. As she navigates the city sidewalk, the warm morning light reflecting off shop windows, the subtle hum of traffic and pedestrians creating a natural ambient rhythm that contrasts with the intensity of her operational presence. 3. The white ICE agent in a personal moment, sitting in a quiet apartment, uniform jacket draped over a chair, reading documents on a cluttered desk, morning lights streaming through blinds casting linear patterns across the floor and wall, expression serious but contemplative, a faint coffee cup steam curling upward, emphasizing his methodical routine and disciplined life outside the terminal. 4. A tense confrontation in the terminal with a new antagonist introduced, the black woman and the white ICE agent standing alert on opposite sides of a metallic counter, glare and body tension indicating strategic anticipation, reflections on polished floors capturing partial silhouettes, overhead lighting throwing sharp contrasts that heighten the stakes. Passengers frozen in motion as the trio becomes the focal point of a sudden, cinematic tableau of tension. 5. A quiet surveillance room with both characters reviewing security footage, monitors casting soft glows on their focused faces, the black woman pointing subtly at a frame while the agent leans forward, hands clasped, shadows dancing across walls filled with maps and data sheets, the low hum of electronics creating suspenseful rhythm, indicating preparation and strategic alignment, emphasizing the mental battle and coordination before decisive action. 6. The resolution scene in the terminal, the black woman and white ICE agent standing slightly apart but aligned, light filtering through large windows highlighting their faces and posture, relaxed yet alert expressions, passengers moving normally around them, a subtle smile or nod exchanged indicating mutual respect and acknowledgement of success. The atmosphere imbued with quiet triumph and cinematic closure. Shadows and reflections softly emphasizing the calm after the tension of preceding events.